Ladies and gentlemen, button pushers and wrench turners, welcome to another episode of Something's Broken. My name's Taylor Goodyear and I own TG CNC Service out of Wisconsin. This past week was really busy between me and my contractor. We had a full week of work and we had a lot of good, successful repairs. Some that I've never seen before or ever been a part of, and some we've seen before, and we're able to find solutions. So, the first one, I was at my top customer again on Monday, fucking with this V80 vertical lathe, this Akuma Hoa, and I found that the gib plate on the Z-axis column was completely loose, so they couldn't get any kind of good finish on their parts. I thought it was something to do with the turret after I rebuilt it. No, just the retaining gib plate on the back was completely loose. So tighten that up. Double check my load monitor because that's how this machine specifically is set with the gibs. Is 50% load roughly. I think it was 72% load in the negative, I think, and then 35% load in the positive. I might have those backwards, but either way, we got it set, no issues. They've been running the machine all week, haven't had any issues. So thank fuck, man, because I really don't want to work on this thing anymore. But Tuesday was at another one of my customers. They have a Mori 1500, an NL 1500, and they have like this weird kind of, not anything that Maury did or anything like that. That they, somebody else who owned the machine put this on the machine, but it's almost like a safety light barrier on the back end of the machine where the opening of the sub spindle or tailstock is. And what they use it for is they'll chuck rods out the ass end, and one of the machines, they have two sister machines, identical circuits set up on with the light barriers. One's working, the other one wasn't. So my customer called me and was like, "Hey, can you figure out how to make this work?" I was like, "Okay." I was like, "I've never fucked with anything like this before, but I'm sure I can figure it out. If the other one's working, I can just walk over to it, look at it, see what's going on, and then just replicate it." And that's what I did. It was pretty straightforward. I just had to hook it into the coil of the door switch on the machine, and then everything worked accordingly. So pretty straightforward. Customer was happy about that. I like those kinds of jobs because they're different. You know, I don't see shit like that often, or being asked to, "Hey, can you just figure this out, please?" Of aftermarket shit, or custom shit that customers put on their machines. So it adds safety to the machine. So as far as like liability goes, doing shit like that, I was okay with because it added an extra safety measure to the machine. So not taking one away or bypassing one. So I was okay with that. That was my first question when my customers asked me about it. Like, "Hey, what's this do for safety on the machine?" And because if there's anything that gets into bypassing safety of machines, I will not touch it. I will not. Nope. I won't add things. I will add things to increase safety, but I will not bypass things for less safety. So, um, but no, this was good. This was a good circuit. I'm glad they actually called me in to get it set up because a little sketchy running it. So, um, Wednesday, and no, just Wednesday, we were at another customer. My contractor came with me this time. They had two Doosan lathes. One has a encoder issue on the tailstock that needed to be replaced that somebody else diagnosed. So the customer asked me to come in to swap out the encoder, this like string along encoder on the tailstock, and I got that swapped out. And it didn't take care of the problem. It's still not seeing the feedback of the encoder, so we were pretty sure that it was the I/O unit, the FANUC I/O unit in the electrical cabinet, because there's really nothing else in that circuit. So I got a quote for the customer, gave it to the customer, just kind of left it up to them. They were still able to run the machine, which is good. The machine's not technically down. They just can't run the tailstock per se. which they were okay with because they were already kind of not able to run the tailstock before, but still able to run the machine. So they just went back to doing that, and they said we'll get a hold of Fanuc and whatnot. So maybe they'll call me back in. I don't know. Maybe to replace the IL unit. While I was doing that, my contractor was working on a consistent intermittent issue on another Doosan. And what was happening, from what I understand, is the coolant pump would go through like a weird phase where it would constantly trip the thermal overload. The customer has been dealing with this for a year, sounds like, roughly. So we did some investigating, at least my contractor did, and I kind of went over and seen what he found. And we found some arcing on the prong connectors that connect the contactor to the thermal overload, which is not good. That means there was a loose connection and arcing over time. And possibly causing a, I don't know, if contactors are kind of weird to me. I've seen them work and then not work and then work and then not work. So it was kind of weird because we couldn't get the machine to alarm out while we were there. And I wrote a program to replicate turret indexing, cooling on. So this thing is just firing, and we still couldn't get the alarm out. But nonetheless, we found quite a bit of contactor dust, the coil dust on the contactor, which is a little alarming. I don't like seeing that. And we seen some heat marks where the plastic kind of turned black a little bit, like it was getting heat in a sense. So that's also not good. So we made the decision to we meg the motor, ohm the motor, through the cabling. All that's good. We checked the amp draw on all three legs through consistent turret indexing and cooling on and off. The inrush current was about 14 amps on per leg, but the running amps were about 7 amps per leg, and that was fine. The thermal overload, the customer cranked it up to its max. I think it was like 14 amps or 15 amps or something on the overload. So of course we weren't going to trip the overload. Even with the inrush current, it happens so quick that the thermal, doesn't really detect it. But we still didn't see anything motor through cabling wise, anything that alerted us on that. Everything kind of pointed at the thermal and the contactor. Now the customer told us that they replaced the motor, they replaced the cabling, they replaced the thermal, they replaced the contactor, and this issue is still happening. But we did some more investigating and asking more questions to the operator that typically runs the machine. So what we found out was the thermal overload was new, but the contactor was pulled out of another machine that was already running, pre this machine having its issue. So they never actually truly put a new contactor in the machine. They actually just took a used contactor from another machine and put it in this machine. And when they did that, they left some loose connections and essentially just caused this contactor to just go to shit over time. So we made the decision to replace the thermal and the contactor stack together outright, because everything else looked fine from the cabling out to the motor. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward circuit. If the motor meg's fine, insulation test is fine, through the cabling, everything's fine, good. Amps aren't like through the roof on one leg over the other two, usually pretty good. So we replaced the contactor and the thermal overload in that machine, and as far as I know, there hasn't been any issues. So we're gonna just ride with that, and we told the customer, just let us know what happens. If you find that it continues to do it, then then we'd have to dig deeper into the circuit. But I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You have your feed into the thermal overload, goes through your thermal, goes through your contactor, through the cabling, out to the motor. It's a pretty straightforward circuit. So I think we got it. I really do, because like I said, there's really nothing else. And if the next thing would be like replacing the cable and the motor, which they already done this. So I just don't see that being the issue. So we're gonna roll with this, and we're gonna see what happens. Everything still looked good after we replaced the thermal and the contactor. So um, after that, I had on Thursday a new customer hit me up. They are about an hour and a half away. Now this is an interesting story. When they first got a hold of me, so from what I understood, it was a hard-hinge VMC 480p3, a hard-hinge Bridgeport, or an older one with a FANUC control. So from what I understand, they had another service company come out. They diagnosed or troubleshot a faulty encoder, spindle encoder, replaced the encoder, still had the same alarm on spindle orientation, but not spindle rotation, like RPM, signal RPM. So they had FANUC come out. FANUC replaced the drive unit, didn't take care of the problem, put the old drive unit back in, and was like, "We don't know what's going on. You gotta call the manufacturer, the OEM of the machine, or the encoder, whatever." So they got a hold of me after they had two service companies in, and nobody could really figure out what was going on. And when I hear shit like this makes me nervous, because it's like, okay, well, how do two service companies come in and not find an issue, and now you're reaching out to a third service company and hoping that I might have I might see something different. But this encoder circuit was very straightforward. Very straightforward. You literally just had the encoder counter. Cable was already attached, so the cable wasn't separate. It was all one piece. It ran all the ways back to the drive unit. Pretty straightforward, right? So I was like, okay. So my contractor and I headed out there Thursday, and all the covers and shit were off and whatnot, and immediately I was like, okay, maybe it's spindle orientation is a specific way that it's set on this machine. I don't have too much experience on hard-hinge machines per se. I obviously know FANUC, but I didn't know if there was a different way that spindle orientation was set on this machine. So I started calling all my contacts. I started trying to get a hold of hard-hinge, which was, they don't make Bridgeport and haven't for years, and they sold off to Kellenberger. Clausing bought him. I mean, just so many hands hard-hinge has been through. So trying to get a hold of anybody was almost impossible. I didn't even look at the machine. I just immediately started calling. And when we couldn't get a hold of anybody, then I finally started looking at the machine. Now, we had already been there for an hour. So I started looking at the encoder. And I'm like, looking at the encoder, I was like, with my experience, man, that's a hell of a gap between the encoder and the spindle gear. Now, the spindle gear has a bunch of little tick marks on it, and then there's one tick on it that's got basically a half tick on it, and it's cut out, right? So that's its counter from that. So I'm looking at it, and from my experience, I was like, man, that's a fucking hell of a gap. And I was always taught that an encoder gap, a good rule of thumb, is the width of, let me get one of these, a business card. Yeah, it sounds stupid, but the width of a business card is a very good indication of the gap that should be set on an encoder to a spindle gear. So I asked my contractor, because I didn't have my business cards on me. So I asked him, I was like, hey man, you got a business card on me? And on him, and he gave it to me, and I set the gap, and went ahead and did M19. No issues. Everything worked. Didn't alarm out. Nothing. I was like, okay. So the gap just had to be set. So we did spindle rotations, RPMs up to a lot, and did several M19s. I put a tool in the spindle, double check tool change position, make sure none of that changed. Spindle orientation on Fanic is parameter 4077. That was already set. Did a few MDI tool changes, no issues. Customer was fucking thrilled, man. We were there for 2 hours and we fixed it and we headed out. I mean, it was cool. It was cool to be able to do that. The customer was very thankful for it. They left me a nice Google review. Legends. I love customers like that, man. And yeah, and yeah, I think we'll probably be in there in the future. But whatever. I mean, those kinds of problems are they're nice to have. They're when you go back to what you go back to your experience over years. Sometimes somebody just knows just a not more, but just something else that you don't know. Something else, someone else knows it, and that's kind of what my situation was going into that problem. I just knew just a little bit more, or I knew something different, and I applied it to this job, and it worked. Um, and as far as I know, the machine's still running. Customer sent me a nice email and thanking me and whatnot. So that was that was a cool job. My uh, contractor, that fucker, man. I was like, all right, you're buying lunch, right? He's like, nope. He's like, it was my business card that fixed the machine. That fucker, dude. Oh, he kills me. I was like, all right, you know what? Yeah, that's fair. I'll buy you lunch, you motherfucker, man. So yeah, it was cool. Um, Friday, I finally sat down and had a meeting with a machine tool distributor out of Milwaukee. We had a really good meeting. Obviously, we were talking about how we can work with each other in the future, how we can use each other's services. Um, Anybody in service or owns their own service company, you know how those meetings can go. It's kind of can be a lot of just smoke blowing. But I always try to take meetings with anybody. I don't care if it's just smoke blowing or not, because those opportunities, you get to meet people and network with people, even if they don't ever hire you or ever use you for your services or something like that. You still know them now, and now you have a network with them, so you could always somehow use them in the future if you need to, or phone a friend in the future for a problem. They might have the answer to that. But the owner of it was awesome dude, man. He started this machine tool distributor this distribution company. Holy shit. It's pretty late. Started this machine tool distribution company about 3 years ago, and he's done very well. He's got several employees. He's got a couple of service guys. He's doing great, and I love meeting people like that. People that start from the ground up and are flourishing from that. I mean, it's great. I love meeting people like that. I'm not anti-corporate, but I just rather not work for a corporation. You know what I mean? If I can help out somebody that's on the same level as me, like starting from the bottom and building their own business from the bottom up without any help, yeah, those are the people I want to work with, man. That's who I want to see succeed. And if I can help them succeed, fuck yeah, I'm all for it. So I don't know if we'll work with each other in the future. I have no idea. I hope we do. Sounds like there's some opportunities there for us, for him to use me as a service company, as a subcontractor in the future. And if that happens, hey, great. Like, I'll help him out however I can, especially local. Like, I mean, local Wisconsinite, man. Like, yeah, I'm all for it. Like, I'll help you however I can in the future. Scratch my back, I scratch yours, however I can. So, it's positive, really positive. So, I'm gonna stay in touch with them. I sent them an email. We're setting up a schedule app that I use. so they can just take a look at my schedule if they ever got something they need help with or want to throw my way, something like that. And then, of course, in contingent with that, I give them leads, you know, at any of my customers that are looking for, machines. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm excited though. I'm always excited to meet people like that and possible new opportunities. So, all right. Next week. Next week is just as busy. I'm booking about 2 to 3 weeks out right now, roughly. Um, so next week I got a ball screw, and then after that, well, no, ball screw is following week. Next week, Monday, I have a new customer, and they have a Daewoo Puma, an old one from like 1999. They are having some power up issues. Um, New customer, not far from here, like 30-40 minutes. So I'm gonna go out there and check it out and see if I can't figure it out for them. Contractor is at a returning customer. They also have a Daewoo Puma that is having a power up issue as well. So I'm sending him out there to see if he can take a look at that and see if he can get any leads on what he wants, or what's going on with the machine, and then what the customer wants in order for them to run the machine. And then I have a turret rebuild on a Hyundai wheel lathe starting Wednesday. And that should pretty much take me the rest of the week. About 2 days, roughly. I could probably knock it out in 2 days, but we'll see. I booked it for the last 3 days of the week. And yeah, so that'll be this upcoming week. We're staying busy. We're getting busy, and it's good. It's a good thing. All right. Motivation time. Consistency, man. I harped about this on a couple of podcasts about consistency. And if you listen to any of my other podcasts, recent podcasts, I've talked about me trying to learn Spanish and trying to stay consistent and motivated and trying to retain everything. Consistency. I have to keep doing it. And I know that if I don't keep doing it and stay consistent, then I'm not gonna get it. And I think some people kind of get in that same situation or that same funk where they're doing something and then the consistency falls off, and now you're no longer in it, and now you're trying to get back into it. And I've always said the hardest part is always getting started. Staying consistent is the easy part. It's still hard, but it's the easier part. If that makes any sense. So stay consistent. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're working towards, if it's a weight loss journey or goals in the gym or in school, or you're trying to learn something, or something at work, that a project you're working on, stay consistent. And I promise you will get what you want out of it. You just have to stay consistent. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. My name's Tayler Goodyear, and I own TG CNC Service out of Wisconsin. And I will check you guys next week. We'll see you guys.